Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you all for coming. I hope you know what we're all here for today, inshallah. Very quickly, I know we're a little bit behind schedule and we don't want to lose any more time than necessary. So let me start by introducing Dr. Munir. Although someone like Dr. Munir doesn't really need any introduction, he's been part of our community and a member of the AMA for a very long time. And in case you don't know him, he's, mashallah, married with 4 children and, alhamdulillah, 5 grandchildren. So he's a full-time GP, and I don't know how he finds the time, but he's, mashallah, been spending a lot of time doing Islamic da'wah since 1984. He's a former president of the Young Muslims UK for 2 terms, and also on the National Shura for the Islamic Society of Britain, for which he's also been the president for 6 years. We're actually quite fortunate to have somebody like Dr. Munir among us, because he's been studying Islam for over 30 years and still continues to do so. With sort of eminent teachers that he's been very privileged to be able to learn from some of the most eminent scholars of our time, including Ustad Qur'an Murad. He's also travelled quite extensively as part of his Islamic studies, and for him to acquire knowledge to the Middle East in terms of Damascus and Cairo, to learn the Arabic language, and for Sharia studies as well. His main teacher has been Sheikh Abdullah Yusuf al-Judai, who's also on the European Fatwa Council, where he has sort of one-to-one sessions with him, and that's again a very privileged position to be in. He has studied almost all aspects of Islam, but does sort of specialize in Aqeedah and Hadiths, is that right? And also had studied in, at the moment he's studying Comparative Fiqh in Arabic and English as well. As far as today is concerned, we have the program will hopefully start as follows. The session 1 will be sort of how the purpose of Ramadan, how it started, moon sighting, opinions regarding length of fast, and so on and so forth. Then we'll have a small break, and we want to try and keep those breaks to as small as possible because we were a little bit behind schedule. We'll then follow on with the second session, which is looking at fasting, those people who are exempt, and some of the reasons behind that. Followed by then another break, and then a third session would be the etiquette of fasting, what's allowed, what's not allowed as well. The final session, which hopefully will start around about 5 o'clock inshallah, will be again the continuation of the fasting, etiquette of fasting, tarawih, Laylatul Qadr, and other things that we can sort of fit in as well. At the end, we'll have a session, a question and answer session for about 20 minutes, inshallah, and then we'll take it from there. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Dr. Munir.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهدي ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وأسوتنا محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحابته ومن تبعه إلى يوم الدين أما بعد أيها الإخوة أحييكم بتحية الإسلام السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Peace and mercy of Allah be with you all. And we begin always with praising Allah, for He is worthy of all praise. And we turn to Him for His forgiveness, guidance and mercy as we seek refuge and protection in Him from the bad that is within us and from our bad deeds. Know that one who is then guided by Allah, they are truly guided. One who is left to go astray, they will not find a guide or a protector or a helper after that. And I bear witness that there is no God but the one God, the creator of the heavens and the earth and all that is between them, and He knows the inner secrets of our hearts, and He has no partners. And I bear witness that Muhammad, peace and praise of Allah be upon him, is His servant, slave and messenger. Welcome. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we pray to Him, send His mercy and barakah on this gathering. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to benefit from this and increase us in ajr in this world and the hereafter. And we ask Allah to purify our hearts, to make our intentions for coming here to grow closer to Him and for His pleasure alone, and that He accepts from us these efforts. And praise be to Allah. I'm encouraged by seeing even this number of people coming from the community. I felt it an obligation on myself, as people in other Islamic centers, that as Ramadan is approaching, that we make available to our community the knowledge which is special in that field, what many people don't know about, and many people don't get chance to ask except Google, or should I say Sheikh Google, to try and find out what the reality is, which is often quite dangerous and can be quite misleading. So that is a duty I feel for myself, having studied aspects and of this deen and continuing to do so, to share this with our brothers and sisters here. And I hope that it will be of benefit to yourselves. And for those who are not being able to come, and perhaps it's because of the summer and the sunny days, which we understand. But, you know, I'm always in two minds about this. Shall we do it because it's June, everybody's busy at the weekend, because people won't come anyway? But I feel we have to do it, so that the community then doesn't have an excuse to say, well, this is Islamic Center provides us with no information. We have to go on Sheikh Google and the internet to find out questions and answers. This way, they don't have an other. If people can't come, then it is with them. Perhaps they know it all, but I doubt that very much. But people do have obligations and difficulties, and they're also busy, and we understand that as well. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them. Nevertheless, I feel that we should continue with it, and I try to make this, of course, also close to Ramadan as possible. I mean, it's only literally a week or so away, and not a month before. The methodology is very important. Much of the studies of the A'imma and the Imams and the teachers of the Darul Ulooms and the schools teaching Imams, etc., in this country and abroad, and when I say abroad, in the majority of the Muslim world, it is good that that teaching is going on, but a lot of it, sadly, is to do with learning, yes, from scholarship, but learning from books of scholars and not going back actually to the sources of the Qur'an and authentic Sunnah, which actually is the method by the great scholars of the past and still of some of the present. But I say some of the present, actually very few of the present. The majority of the Imams, etc., they're learning from books that were written a couple of centuries ago. And certainly those majority Pakistani in the Darul Ulooms here, that's the books they're learning from. And they are learning the opinions of scholars from that time, what they thought in their opinions. But I was fortunate enough not just to study comparative fiqh of all the madhahibs in these fields, and continue to do so because it's not complete, but also with that, more importantly, to go back to the sources of the Qur'an and authentic Sunnah, and to look from that, as the scholars themselves have always done. Scholarship isn't about just giving an opinion, but if they're asked, they have to give the evidence of the opinion. And the evidence goes back primarily to the Qur'an and Sunnah. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that with various scholars, but especially, as Javed mentioned, Sheikh Abdullah, Yusuf al-Judai, who is presently in Leeds, who I've been studying for the last 18 years with. And his approach is very much like that. And we're fortunate, having studied, there's a brother who's a colleague of mine who's given talks here as well, Brother Ahtisham. We've studied and traveled, and we've sat with various shuyukh and teachers, I tell you. Including, I was fortunate to have a sitting with the late Sheikh, the great Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali. Of course, there is al-Ghazali from the 7th century or the 8th century of Islam. I'm not talking about that one, I haven't lived that long. We're talking about Muhammad al-Ghazali, who, rahimahullah, died a few years back, the great Mufti of Egypt. I was fortunate to sit with, have a sitting with him. And longer periods with other shuyukh. But we're very fortunate, we feel anyway, to have somebody who's very distinct in Sheikh Abdullah Yusuf al-Judai, in his depth of understanding and knowledge and his fiqh and his ability for that depth, but also the fact that he is one of the rarities of our modern times, and actually rarities over the centuries of Islam. Muhaddithin, who are specialists in hadith, likes likes of Ali ibn al-Madini, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Bukhari, Muslim, Ad-Daraqutni, Ibn Hajar, and others. I haven't got time to go. But they, compared to fuqaha, or the lawyers of, or scholars as we, ulama as we call them, the muhaddithin especially, they were few and far between, as they are till this day. When I say muhaddithin, specialists in hadith, majority of people understand by, included in them are the majority of imams, etc., who are studying in the Darul Ulooms and various institutions. They understand by it somebody who knows a lot of hadith off by heart. That's there tends to be a modern trend of what muhaddith means. But actually, I don't mean that by that. Muhaddith, in my understanding, and the classical understanding, was not one who compiled loads of hadith and learnt them off by heart, but one who was able to do tahqiq of hadith, which is to establish if a hadith, by its chain and by its narrators and by its text, was actually in the first place authentic or not, before you even start discussing it. Is it from the Prophet, in other words, or not? And that is a rarity, and that is a speciality of my teacher. Alhamdulillah. So I've been fortunate to have that aspect. And that's important for the background for you to realize. Now, it's impossible in the 4 hours or less that we have to go through the whole of the fiqh of fasting and Ramadan. Totally impossible. Perhaps we'll need a couple of days, a weekend. And I would do it if I felt there was an interest. I worry that if we have this turnout for 4 hours, what it would be like if I did it for 2 days. But never mind. But we'll take some aspects which I feel are important, and perhaps if we miss other things, maybe it'll come in the question answers. Because it's a big area and a big topic. So what we'll start with, inshallah, in the first session is with the Quranic ayat to do with fasting, and we'll build on that, inshallah. Time permitting. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Surah Al-Baqarah, starting from verse 183, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first says, O you who believe, or you who have faith, fasting has been ordained or prescribed. Kutiba, not just it's been written for you. Kutiba, when it comes, kataba alaykum, kutiba alaykum, in the passive sense means it is being made obligatory on you. It means farada alaykum, as the Prophet ﷺ explained himself. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu قال لما جاء شهر رمضان قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قد جاءكم شهر المبارك افترض عليكم صومه أو فرض عليكم صومه. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu says in authentic hadith, says when the month of Ramadan came, the Prophet ﷺ said, what has come to you is a month, to the Sahaba, what has come to you is a month full of barakah. Shahrul Mubarak. What is barakah? Barakah means increase, abundance. Tawarruk is to do with elevation. And with it, we're elevated in our status before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not before others. So it's a month of barakah. It has been made obligatory for you in this month to fast. So we get the evidence of that obligation, what kutiba alaykum as-siyam means in the ayah. Kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum, as it was made obligatory for those before you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Perhaps you may attain this taqwa. First thing, and perhaps I think this aspect, you will have, those who attended the talk, I wasn't here, our brother gave on fasting, was it last Saturday? Anybody managed to come to the talk last Saturday on fasting? Okay. Perhaps he covered some of these aspects of the virtues of fasting, which is what he was concentrating on as far as I'm aware, and not on the fiqh. Siyam itself, sama yasumu, means imsak, to abstain, to hold back. In language it means that. So it can be applied in any situation. In other things where you are holding back or abstaining from something, you can use the word in language, sawm. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that example in the Qur'an as well. When Maryam alayhi salam had the child out of virgin birth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told her, فَقُولِي, then say, إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَمْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ الْإِنسِيَّةَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Maryam, say, surely I have taken a vow with the most merciful. A vow for what? لِصَوْمًا. إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا. To abstain. Here, it doesn't mean she fasted. She took a vow to do sawm, to abstain. Abstain from what? The rest of the ayah explains it. فَلَمْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنسِيًّا. I will not speak on this day. I will abstain from speaking. That was her fast. I will abstain from speaking this day to any human being. So that's how sawm is used by its original meaning. And you can see how that it's in Shara'i meaning, how it is used. Because it's abstention, very specifically though. It came how the Prophet ﷺ showed us how to fast, which is to stay away, of course, from food and drink and sexual relationship between a husband and wife. As we'll clarify later on. That's sawm. So with sawm, what we're doing, we are holding back from that which is normally allowed for us, food and drink, that we just do naturally as human beings. But we're holding back away from it. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's interesting. And this ayah brings out the purpose of fasting in its essence. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say that you will develop this taqwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that perhaps you will develop this taqwa. So everybody who fasts staying away from food and drink, etc., doesn't necessarily develop taqwa. It depends on the quality of the fast. And it is not quantity, but quality that matters. The quality of the fast is crucial. Hence, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And what is taqwa? Interesting, the taqwa itself doesn't mean only people put to be God conscious or pious, etc., in the translations of the Qur'an. It is much more comprehensive than that, the word taqwa. Taqwa means, yes, to be conscious and aware of Allah. For why? To be aware and to be in awe of Allah and His majesty and to be afraid of Allah is the real meaning of taqwa. Is the real meaning of taqwa. Afraid from what? Afraid from doing wrong and sin. In other words, taqwa, when it is developed, it is what holds you back and prevents you from going towards wrong. And as one of my teachers, who was, in my opinion, not only a da'i and one who worked in the field of Islam, da'wah for all his life, but also a mufassir, an explainer of the Qur'an. He said, taqwa is to know for absolute certainty, like when you see a fire, and if you were to put your hand in it, you know it's going to burn. Yes, we know that. Taqwa is that state of heart and mind, to know that if I speak falsehood with my tongue, it will be burning in the fire the same way my hand would burn now. Taqwa is to know that if I look with my eyes at sin, if I hear with my ears at sin, that they will burn in the fire. Taqwa is to know if I fill my belly up with haram, that my belly will be filled with the fire. And I'm absolutely certain of that. Taqwa is to be absolutely certain that if I do things wrong with my limbs and my hands involved in bad, that they will burn in the fire. That is taqwa. And you see the relationship with taqwa and the meaning of sawm. Taqwa, one who has that, what do? They hold themselves back. Sawm and fasting, its meaning is to hold yourself back. So, to practice abstaining from food and drink for His pleasure is like making you get used to developing control over the physical and strengthening the metaphysical, which is a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to do that day in, day out for a month of Ramadan, the purpose is to develop in ourselves taqwa, which is that control of holding back from doing wrong. So you see the link between them, how it does that. How it does that. It's beautiful how it fits together and how we then really understand what the purpose of fasting is. The thing to do with health, the thing to do with losing weight, the thing to do with, or medically they're saying now it cleanses your inside. These are all secondary things, brothers and sisters. Yeah, we can partake and say those things. And thing to do with we feel how the hungry people feel. Yeah, that's part of it, but that's not the essence of fasting. If tomorrow medicine said, well, fasting is harmful for you, and they proved it through experimentation or whatever they do, we would then start saying, oh, I'm not going to fast because it's harmful. Nonsense. Nonsense. And many people, and the average Joe public out there, feel that it is harmful. Oh my goodness, how can you go without food and drink, But that's because there's some element I will come to later. Iman and faith makes a big difference. And all this is linked with Iman and faith. That's why, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. What's the first thing? We missed that, didn't we? It's crucial why in the ayah, for obligation of fasting, Allah began with, O you who have faith. It's for you to fast. If you have no faith, it's impossible for you. That's the condition. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. So that's the essence of fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then continued أياما معدودات فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. For a set number of days. أياما معدودات. And whoever from amongst you فمن كان منكم مريضا is ill or on a journey أو على سفر, then they are to make up similar number of days from other days, from later time. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ, from other days. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. And for those who have the taqah, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ, for those who have the ability for it. Some translated this, for those who have the ability to spend. But the best meaning of this ayah is for those who have the ability to fast, but they don't. They've been given choice here. Fidyatun ta'amu miskin. That they should pay a ransom. Fidya is a ransom. The Sahaba used to say, Fadaka ya Rasulullah. I am ransom for you. I sacrifice myself for you, Ya Rasulullah, out of love for the Prophet. A ransom, the feeding of a poor person, equivalent of a meal. So where was this? Some Sahaba and those Tabi'een and ulama who came after said that this ayah became abrogated by the ayah of the Quran that came after it. Because this ayah, which I've recited to you, gave you choice to fast, or even if you have the ability, to just pay the fidya, equivalent to feeding of a miskin, for each day. So that's why some of them said this is abrogated, because there's no choice. Others, like Aisha radiallahu anha, Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, from the Sahaba, were of the opinion that this ayah, that fasting came gradually. Gradually. The first fast that became obligatory on the believers was in Mecca, was the fast of, anybody know? Sorry? Yeah, it's linked with that, yes. The fast of Ashura. Yeah? Ashura, 10th day of Muharram. That was actually, according to Aisha radiallahu anha, and Ibn Umar and Abdullah ibn Abbas, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, that was obligatory. That was the first fast for the believers. And we have that evidence also from another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is a famous hadith, the hadith which mentions about that we used to encourage our children to fast. Yeah? And we used to go to the mosque, and when they would cry, we had some toys made of wool. We used to occupy them and make them play with them to take their mind off the fast. This is a famous hadith. But this was linked with the fast of Ashura. The complete hadith was linked that on the day of Ashura, the Prophet ﷺ sent a call around in Medina. It must have happened in one of the years. Calling out and shouting out, announcing that this is the day of Ashura. For those who are fasting, they should continue with their fast. For those who weren't fasting, they should start fasting from now and complete the fast. And then the reporting Sahabi says, so we fasted. And mentioned about the children then. That hadith, of course, is also linked with the encouragement of getting children to try and fast. We'll come back to that later. So, they said Ashura was the first fast obligatory. Then, according to Aisha and the other Sahaba I mentioned, that 3 days per month were obligatory on the believers. Hence, Aisha Rana said, for this ayah, أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ. She says, for a few specified days. She means not for Shahr Ramadan. She's saying this applies to 3 days per month. And even those days, you were given ikhtiyar, choice. You could fast them, or you could pay the fidyah. Nevertheless, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that fidyatun ta'amu miskin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after that says, وَمَنْ تَتَوَّأَ خَيْرًا فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. Whoever here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and whoever is able to do tatawwa means more, out of choice. More means giving more to the miskeen here, not more fasting. Yeah, because when they're given choice and they're not fasting and giving ransom, they're not going to do more fasting, are they? It means more fidyah. So, وَمَنْ تَتَوَّأَ خَيْرًا, whoever is able to do more good, they should. فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. It will be good for them, good for him or her. فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. وَأَنْ تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. But if you fast, it will be better for you only if you knew. So even though choice was given in the initial period to fast or pay the fidyah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said still that it was better to fast. So it's not just choice, each is equal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging the fast over the feeding of the miskeen here. Then, we should know that Mu'adh ibn Jabal, who was also from the fuqaha of the Sahaba, disagreed with what the other Sahaba said. He said, أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ. He said from the Sahaba, this is just historical, it makes no difference to us, but I'm giving you just information because it's interesting from the background. He said that this ayah also referred to the fast of the month of Ramadan. And in his opinion, the whole of the fast of the month of Ramadan initially came with a choice. You can fast it or you can pay fidyah. It was better to fast it. So here's the difference of opinion amongst the Sahaba. And then he says, then this ayah became abrogated. In other words, the choice became abrogated. With what? شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. It is in the month of Ramadan in which the Qur'an was sent down as a guidance for humanity. As a guidance for all human beings. This is an important point here as well. For the black, the white, the red, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Australians, the Aborigines, the Red Indians. Hudal linnas, this Qur'an. Many of our people think that we have the Qur'an, it's for us as though it belongs to the East. We don't realize that the Prophet ﷺ was the final messenger to the English people and the Scottish, UK, Europe, everywhere. We are the carriers of the message. But if we don't even understand that it belongs to them, then we'll never give it to them because we'll hold it near us and think it's just for us. Only Pakistanis and Arabs and others are meant to be Muslim. But this guidance of the Quran came for everyone. هُدًى لِلنَّاسِ وَبَيِّنَاتٍ مِّنَ الْهُدَى وَالْفُرْقَانِ وَبَيِّنَاتٍ مِّنَ الْهُدَى وَالْفُرْقَانِ. As a clear guidance and as a criterion. A criterion to decide between right and wrong. فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever is witness of this month, meaning they're alive and present, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ, then they must fast. This la, fal yasum, the la is an obligatory la coming in the Arabic language. They have to fast. Fal yasum. And here, there's no choice given. So now, with this ayah, fasting became obligatory. Obligatory. Fard. Without choice now. Except وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيضًا. Except whoever was ill and on a journey. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. They are to make up the same number of days from other days. يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says after the obligation of fasting and giving exemption? Because He is the most merciful, the most compassionate. For the ill and the one who's a traveler, giving them exemption. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving that exemption. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah wishes ease for you. Bikumul yusr. Allah does not want to put you into difficulty. What does this mean? We don't understand from this that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that fasting is meant to be easy just for a few hours. And if we feel a bit of hunger and thirst and I'm feeling a bit difficult, oh, I should be fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by this verse means that Allah doesn't want to put you under unnecessary difficulty which you cannot bear. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, as the Qur'an says. Allah does not put a burden on any soul that it cannot bear. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He made fasting obligatory for human beings, He knows they can bear this. He knows they can bear this. And when they can't, the exemption's given. This is not a blanket statement of just ease. Yeah? It's not a blanket statement of the idea that fasting didn't come with difficulty. Of course it does. In trial, there is always some difficulty. That's why we call it a trial, don't we? Imtihan. This life is about imtihan. Getting up for Fajr and praying Isha late, is there not difficulty? That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, the most difficult of the salahs for the munafiq, the hypocrite, is the Fajr and the Isha. The Fajr and the Isha. So, deen comes with an element of difficulty, but not difficulty that we cannot bear. It is with that abstaining and feeling hunger and thirst, is it not that we develop links with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is stronger and stronger as we go through it. That is the taqwa. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ. So complete then the period of fasting, meaning the month of Ramadan. وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ. And then mention the greatness of Allah, as we do on Eid. Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ. For that He has guided you all. And that guiding is linked with the Qur'an and Ramadan. Because remember at the beginning of the ayah, what was there? شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ فِيهِ الْقُرْآنِ. And now notice Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the ayah is saying, when you mention the greatness of Allah, remember, it's for Ramadan and fasting and the rewards you're going to get, but because He's guided you through the Qur'an. عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. So that perhaps you will be grateful. Again, perhaps you will be grateful. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues. And then some Sahaba therefore said that this was the third stage of fasting. Some more changes took place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أُحِلَّ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ. It has been made halal for you to go to your wives, and wives to the husband it means as well, for their relationship at night time of fasting. During the nights of the fast, it is made halal for you to do so. And here comes the part of the famous verse which is beautiful. They are your garments and clothes. meaning they adorn you and beautify you and protect you, and you are their garments and clothes. أنتم لباس لهم. علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم فالآن باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alim Allahu. Allah knows that you are deceiving yourselves. Kuntum Alim Allahu annakum kuntum takhtanuna anfusakum. What does he mean by that? Bara ibn Azib, Al-Bara ibn Azib, from the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, said in authentic hadith in Bukhari, he said, the Sahaba, when fasting first came, that we used to, at the night time, after breaking the fast, if we fell asleep and woke up later in the night, that the Sahaba didn't used to have the intimate relationship with their husband and wife, even though it was night time. It seems that initially that was the obligation. But once you've fallen asleep, then there's no relationship. If you wake up, you fall asleep after iftar, say 10 o'clock, wake up at 12, still no, you're not allowed a relationship. But Al-Bara ibn Azib said that some Sahaba used to break this. They still used to have a relationship because it was a natural desire they couldn't control. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alim Allahu annakum kuntum takhtanuna anfusakum. Allah knows what you were doing. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أنفسكم وعفا فتاب عليكم. So he turned to you. وعفا عنكم. And he forgave and overlooked what you did. فالآن باشروهن. From now on now, you are able to have your intimacy. باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم. You are able to have your intimate relationship from now on. فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُ. Bashiru comes from bashar. Bashar means human being, but bashar also mean, they say tabib al-bashriya, or tabib al-bashri, is a dermatologist. Because bashar means skin as well. Skin. Bashiruhun has a wide meaning from bringing skin together, if embracing one another is also bashiruhun, but having the full intimate act of sexual intercourse is also bashiruhun. It depends on the context of the ayah and the hadith as to what we understand from it. Here, Mufassirun are very clear. It doesn't say from now on you can cuddle them. Here it means from now on you can have the relationship, the husband-wife relationship. فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُهُنَّ وَابْتَغُوا, seeking and seek what Allah has written down for you. In other words, what Allah has allowed for you. كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا, and eat and drink. وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. Eat and drink as well as what's been mentioned about the intimate relationship, together with eat and drink until the black thread, the white thread of dawn becomes distinct from the white thread of the night from Fajr time. In other words, then stop. من الفجر ثم أتم الصيام إلى الليل. ثم أتم الصيام إلى الليل. Then complete the fast till the night. And the layl is ghurub al-shams, Maghrib time. So here the Qur'an is making clear now, here in this ayah also the limits of where the fast begins and where it ends. ثم أتم الصيام إلى الليل. ولا تباشروهن. Allah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues. وَلَا تُبَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, however, do not have the intimate relationship with husband and wife if you're doing i'tikaf in the masjid. These are the boundaries. تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ. These are the boundaries set by Allah. فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا. Don't go near them. In other words, don't go beyond them. Here, near them means don't go beyond them. Stay within the boundaries. فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا. Thus does Allah explain to human beings His signs. Why? لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. That's why these ayat should all be read together and you'll understand. Look what Allah SWT ends with at the end. So that perhaps they may have taqwa again. And look where it started with. The purpose of fasting, taqwa. Ends with taqwa. And in the middle of it, I left an ayah. Before أُحِلَّ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَةُ الصِّيَامِ. But why is it there? To think for us. Allah knows why it's there better than we can only contemplate. But look at the ayah that's there in between the obligation of fasting and then mentioning about the night time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. And when my servant and slave asks about me, say, إِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Surely I am really near. That's what qareeb means. فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي وَلَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in the middle of these ayat of fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, my servants asked about me. Say, I am really near. I answer the call, the call of the caller. Da'watid da, the dua of the caller when he or she is calling. Then, in turn, فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. Let them answer my call. What is Allah calling to? All the good things that Allah is calling to. Let them answer my call. وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي. And believe in me. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. So that perhaps they will be guided aright. And these ayat are to do with qurb, closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are they not? So what's the essence of fasting, brothers and sisters? It is to grow close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is to become dear and dear to Him, to beseech Him and make dua to Him, and to be a willing servant to listen to His call, to be a real believer. All that is there, this ayah. It's there for a reason in the middle of the ayahs of fasting. Linking with taqwa again, which is at the beginning and the end of these ayahs. Time is running out. 10 minutes or so for this session. I have to mention this because I won't get time later. Of course, and I'm going to put it in a nutshell because it's a big topic as well on its own. I could spend 2 hours easily. We have here the issue now and debate, and it's in the community, but it's a debate of scholarship as well. And the arguments surrounding what happens when the fast becomes extremely long. Some say, like here for us now in summer, what we're going to do. Some say, what do we mean by extremely long first? We have to define that. Because Qur'an and Sunnah don't define extremely long and extremely short. So when we define it, some scholars say, what do I mean by that? It's pure ijtihad, because we have no evidence, but we need to look at it. Some say, oh, well, if it gets over 15 hours, because the maximum is around 15 hours in Mecca, in Hijaz, where the revelation came, so if it goes beyond that, then we need to look at it and say, oh, why am I doing 15 and 16 hours? Others said, no, it's 18 hours. Others said, no, it's 21 hours. Others said, no, it's 23 hours. Others said, no, it's when the sun doesn't even set completely. Yeah, which is a rare thing. So there's a whole debate on where we're going to draw the line first. Yeah, in this case, the issue is, what are the boundaries of the fasting? Because the fast can be too long to bear, and if we apply it, not just, especially in the northern parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, northern parts of Canada or Iceland, etc., but even northern parts of Britain, 18 hours plus, etc. Yeah. There's a whole debate of what are we to do. And I say further, fast becomes difficult, perhaps not for everyone, but certainly for people who are surgeons, who are going to be doing, you've got a surgeon who's been fasting 12 hours already, and he's about to operate on your eye in the afternoon or late in the evening, and you might feel a bit uncomfortable, depending on the state he's going to be in, because we're not all the same. Yeah? Lorry drivers, pilots, etc., etc. Yeah? And others it's going to affect. Because fast does have an effect, there's no doubt about that. So what's the situation with these things? Some said, what about lack of sleep? Because it's a very short night, and therefore people are tired, and that's not fair either, because they're not getting enough sleep compared to other people. So these are the issues surrounding this. In regards to this, two major opinions came. One, some people call the dominant opinion, which I believe is the dominant opinion myself as well. That's the opinion I personally like, so I'll agree with calling it a dominant opinion. And the other is a less dominant opinion, but it is the opinion of scholars. It's scholarship, not ignorant people who came up with this idea, and you should know that as well. Scholars, especially in the last century, like Mahmoud Shawtut from Egypt and Cairo, Mustafa Zarqa had similar idea in what we call the less dominant opinion, and also one of the committees of Darul Ifta in Egypt came with this. And this idea apparently is, some people think it's only been debated now. Actually, it was around in the 80s and before. So this fatwa from Egypt, etc., of the less dominant opinion, is from Egypt, from the 80s, not now. But people are now, there's a lot of debate about it in the community because it's out on the internet, so people are thinking about it. So what's the remedy? Well, for the most dominant opinion, this is how we see it, and how I would see it, is that Islam came with its boundaries, etc. And ibadat and others, especially in ibadat, very fixed, very little room for ijtihad in ibadat. But the rukhas and the ease came. For example, salah. If you're unable to stand, you can sit for salah. If you can't sit down, you can lie down and do salah. All that came from Qur'an and Sunnah itself. And fasting came with those ideas as well. And the idea of, when we look at the maqasid, as the ulama of usul, jurisprudence look, they came with a rule which said, al-mushakka tajlibu taysir. They didn't make it up. Qur'an and Sunnah came with that idea. So if you look at that difficulty, when you run into difficulty, Islam always brings you the ease. Hence, illness, you break your fast and make it up later. That's the idea of running into difficulty. And there are many examples in Islam of that kind of thing. When you're running, I've said something about salah earlier on as well. When you're dying of starvation, are you allowed to eat the pig? Yes, you are. Actually, if you were on the verge of dying, you have to eat the pig to safeguard life. So from this idea came the idea of difficulty brings the ease. However, and it came in mentioning, the Quran mentioning illness and journeying, travel, to make up days later. Illness and journeying, because they will affect the ability of the person to fast. If we take illness, that's the best example, if we want to apply it in relation to those who are doing long fasts. Some say that we take illa and do qiyas or analogy, but I don't think, if you look at it, actually, you don't even need to do analogy. Because inherent in illness is the fact that somebody's feeling, what is illness? Illness is a wide range. Qur'an and Sunnah never brought condition that it has to be a particular kind of illness. So somebody feeling dizzy, somebody feeling a headache, that kind of thing all comes with the idea of illness. That's why some scholars, classical times, actually said that even a painful finger, and actually they were quite clever from centuries ago to say that. For the average Joe public, they must think, what, pain in the finger? But actually, if you get an infection and what's something called a whitlow in the finger, it is extremely painful. It really is. They go to emergency department to try and have an incision in it because it's so painful. So they said even a painful finger comes in the category of illness. Anyway, if we apply the idea of illness to those categories of long fasts, etc., but people are not able to cope, then you would say that they should break their fast. Whether it's 18 hours, whether it's 20 odd hours. Not as a blanket rule though. Not as a blanket rule that everybody who's living in the area where the fast is 18 hours or 21 hours, you all have to break your fast to make it up later. No. And that's the dominant opinion. That not as a blanket rule, but those who feel that they cannot cope, not without trying it, that's the other thing. Because even the 18-hour fast, for us from a distance, we look at it and think, oh my goodness, it's going to be difficult. And the first few days are difficult, brothers and sisters. But as you go through them and your body and mind gets used to it, and your heart fills with more iman, then you're able to deal with it better. So without trying it, I don't say as a blanket rule everybody should suddenly say, no, I can't do it. Because it feels like that initially, I can't do it, but it changes. And that's the difference that iman makes. And getting your body used to it. But nevertheless, for those who are in a situation of doing surgery in the afternoon, and they already know from experience that if their glucose level is low, they're not going to be operating at the right. So it's affected them like the ill person's been affected. But now it's affecting somebody else's life as well. For those, break the fast and make it up from later. And at the weekend when they're not doing, so we don't say the whole month it's all right, just have a holiday. The weekend they're not operating, fine, you should fast. You know, or the obligation comes back. And the same idea with those in 21 hours or 23 hours. Yeah, there are people who still fast. Some people say, oh, it's against the sunnah to fast so long. It's nonsense to say that. Nonsense to say that. Prophet ﷺ used to do wisal, which is he continuously stayed hungry for 2 or 3, 4 days at a time without having iftar or suhoor. But the Prophet ﷺ, when Sahaba asked about trying to do it, he forbade them. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, but you do it. The Prophet ﷺ said, but for me, I'm not like you. Yeah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala feeds me and gives me nourishment and irrigation, quenches my thirst at night time. He doesn't do that for you. We don't know how that happened, but that's what the Prophet ﷺ said. Because he was in this regard special. But he forbade, he didn't say it's okay, you can do it. Prophet ﷺ said an authentic hadith from wisal, he said, but if you want to do wisal, then the best that I can offer you is fast till suhoor time. In other words, you do a 24-hour fast. And Sahaba used to do it. So to say it's against the Sunnah is wrong. So can people fast 24 hours or 23 hours or 21 hours in Norway? Yes, there are people who can. But for those who find it absolutely difficult, then they can break their fast and make it up later. And that is the solution in those ideas. Some people say, oh, there'll be a whole load of communities, maybe groups of people who can't do 21 and 23 hours. No problem. The problem is also with us that we see breaking of a fast for a reason as something as though we made a sin. It is not. It is a mercy of Allah. And His messenger that came with this message, and breaking the fast is not negative when there's a reason for it. If I begin my fast, Ramadan, and I become ill during the day, I can break my fast. I know we don't like to do it, but we shouldn't feel as though we're doing some sort of wrong and makruh. It is not makruh to break your fast when you're ill. It is recommended mustahab to break your fast when you're ill, and sometimes becomes obligatory to break your fast when you're ill because of danger to your life. But we refuse, sometimes fail to understand this. Very briefly, and I have to finish here, the less dominant opinion, it runs into all kinds of problems for me. Because they look at the idea of why should we fast 18, 21 hours in Iceland, etc., north of Canada, and the people and the Sahaba who lived in Mecca and Medina, they only did maximum 15, and all the Muslims there are doing 15. Oh, that's not fair. That's one of the arguments, which is nonsense actually. I'll tell you why it's nonsense. Because they forget that the season changes and turns the other way as well. So if I do 18 hours now, I also do just 8 hours when they're still doing 12 and 15 hours, don't I? Or are you going to go by the weather now as well? They do it in the hot weather, so it's more difficult for them. We're doing it in relatively cool weather. It's not 50 degrees, is it? If we start making these kind of comparisons, where are we going to end up? Or in Iceland, it's freezing. So we say, well, you do it less now. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He sent His revelation, and He made these boundaries of the dawn till Maghrib, He made them clear in the Qur'an. You can't, there we call absolute evidence. You can't shift them around. So this idea of injustice can work the other way as well. And those who are doing 21 hours in the summer, what will they be doing in winter? 3 hours. And you can say, oh, well, that's not fair either. No, it balances out in the end. And the idea, some came with the idea that we should, they came with the idea that we should fast in these areas where it's, like I said, some said 18 hours, some said 16 hours, some said 23 hours, various opinions. But we should not follow the signs of the sun in that land. We should follow Mecca timings. In other words, in Mecca and Medina, the fast is 15 hours. Even though the sun hasn't gone down, I should fast 15 hours. Some said, take the nearest country which has a moderate length of day. What's the moderate length of day? They didn't say. Is it 15 hours? Is it 16 hours? Is it 17 hours? So how am I going to apply it? Some said a moderate length of day in a Muslim country. Hang on, what's that to do with anything? The moderate length of day doesn't change in a Muslim country compared to a non-Muslim country next to it. Why does it have to be Muslim? It's nonsense. Or perhaps we understand by Muslim where lots of bombs and killing each other is going on nowadays. Sadly. I'm sorry for being, I have to say that. But anyway, it's a silly idea of applying it to a Muslim country, even if we're going to follow that. How? When we apply this, we run into big trouble. How? Never mind the 21 hours, we've got 18 odd hours here. So let's say we're going to say that moderate length of day will take Mecca and it's 15 hours now, right? So where am I going to start and where am I going to end? I'm either going to have to eat to get 15 hours. Now we've got Maghrib about 9:30, say, or 10:45. So to get 15 hours, I'm going to have to eat around 7 o'clock in the morning. Is that right? suhoor if I want to do it from that side. So I'll be having suhoor around 7 o'clock, and the sun came up when? 4:30? That's what they say. In fact, somebody's already produced a timetable, I've seen it. I have to say, it's based on scholarly opinion. I have to say that. It's ijtihad. I disagree with it myself. I'm telling you my opinion. There'll be people who follow. And we don't call them munafiqs and kuffar, by the way. Be careful. I'm giving you my opinion. Okay? So we'll be starting 7 o'clock. For some who've said that. Others have said, keep the suhoor at that time, and you break your fast, you'll be breaking around 6 o'clock. And it's bright sunshine outside. I just can't see how I'm going to do that. Yeah. When the Qur'an is saying, ثُمَّ أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامُ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ, Maghrib time. I have real difficulty with that. Okay. But it is a scholarly opinion because of these situations. This is how they've in a nutshell, I've not gone into all the arguments, this is how they're telling me. I would like to stop there. We did start a bit late, didn't we? So,
yeah, if we can have maybe
10 minutes, yeah?
Well, 9 minutes.
Okay,
come back at about 3:30.